Hello everyone, welcome to my second chess video, possibly the second of many. The subject of today's video is a book that I recently bought at a airport bookstore. I posted it on the Facebook group called Chess Book Collectors, and it received a lot of favorable response, I would say, for the most part. And this book is a hardcover book from the 1970s, published by RHM Press, and it's a hardcover with a dust jacket, and it happens to be in pristine condition. The purpose of the video here is to just give you an overview of the book, not a book review per se, but in any event, I hope you find it interesting, and if you do, like my video. So, how to open a chess game. This was written by several grandmasters, starting with Larry Evans, but you see Grigoric, I probably didn't pronounce that right, Hort, Petrosian, Portiche, Paul Keres, and Bent Larsen. So all strong players in their own right. So with this book, I am going to start and describe it. So here we have the book, and here you have the authors that I mentioned. And here's the table of contents. So there's an introduction by Larry Evans, a glossary, and then there are several chapters in which each of these grandmasters pontificates on the opening phase of the game of chess. So, with that, I'll give a brief overview. So, there is an introduction by Larry Evans, which basically explains the reason for putting the book together and some general background. Then we have a glossary, which goes on for multiple pages, which describes various terminology that you would find in chess or chess books, which should be familiar to most players who have been reading or studying chess for any period of time, but it goes all the way from advantage all the way to, and pardon my pronunciation, but to Zwischenzug, or an in-between move, and Zugzwang, which we know primarily from endgames. So the first chapter, which is by Larry Evans, is Basic Chess Strategy. And he has some general principles which I think are mostly intuitive for experienced players. But perhaps maybe one of the most useful is number 10, is assume your opponent will find the right moves and don't play for crude traps except in desperation. So that's good advice. And then he goes on to say it's not important to memorize detailed opening variations, which at the amateur level is arguably true. So some fairly basic concepts like the center and centralizing your pieces and mobilizing. So this definitely is more of an introductory book or chapter, and so he goes on for several pages about basic chess strategy. Very introductory. The second chapter is there's my $10 receipt. The second chapter is by Grigoric. He, for many people who had Chess Life and Review Chess Life in the 70s, he wrote a very detailed opening article every month, and I forget the name of it at the moment, but it was very interesting. So he goes on to talk about the elements of opening strategy, and he talks about time, and we all know that tempos are very important. And then he uses some example games to talk about different elements of opening strategy. So, with that, let's move on to chapter 3. Let's Quite a long chapter, bear with me. Theory and practice. So now we get a little deeper into the topic, and Grandmaster Hort is going over some of this, so he divides the chapter into multiple sections. One is learning the basic opening principles. He uses some classical game from 1910 to start his discussion. In fact, from what I can tell, he's using a lot of his examples from older games. I'll try to step back here. The thing I like about this book so far is that there's a lot of words. And while in the end, analysis and concrete calculation is important, concepts are important as well. And he lists his own list on the right side of this page here of different principles that everyone, including especially beginners, should know. So very, very interesting. The other section of this chapter is methods of study, and he has his own beliefs about how how you should study chess. So again, apologize for my recording techniques here. But he goes on, and then he gives several actual game examples after he's given his general thoughts. And then he's got a section number 3 for advanced players. And it looks like he's actually throwing out the idea of the Tromposky or some similar moves, which I guess for that time would have been a little revolutionary. And there we go. So that's chapter 3. So now we go into chapter 4 by Grandmaster Portish. And again, a lot of words. He's talking about developing and opening repertoire. And he repeats an axiom that many of us know, which is your only task in the opening is to reach a playable middle game. So he has some various examples. In this case, he's actually talking about the Roy Lopez or Italian game, the exchange variation. Not very popular, although Fischer played it at one time. And so he goes on and on about developing an opening repertoire. He gives an example about the King's Indian attack, and Queen's Gambit declined, Nimzo Indian defense, you see down here in the corner. So again, still somewhat of an introductory text, but he's using actual examples with annotated games. The other observation, of course, is this is an older book, so it's in descriptive notation. Not everyone's favorite, including my own, now that it's been many years, but I'm still very functional with descriptive notation. On to Chapter 5, Questions of Opening Theory by former world champion Petrosian. So he has, again, some interesting topics, which, again, a lot of words, but pretty soon he jumps into actual games. The actual age of these games is not really known by me, although judging from the players, it's probably from the 60s and 70s. In fact, the one on the left here is from the 1964 Soviet Championship. So, that is Petrosian. He's used a few of his games, but he's also used a game from the 1957 World Championship match. And on it goes. So, let's move on to the next chapter, which is a long time coming, so Petrosian must have had a lot to say. And that is a personal approach to the openings. And this is by Grandmaster Bent Larsen in the late 60s, early 70s. One of the best, if not the best, player in the Western world, rivaled only probably by Fisher himself. So he starts out, it appears, by talking about his foray into the King's Gambit. Again, he starts a chapter with a lot of text, but now actually goes to the Queen's Gambit decline and the discussion of the isolated queen pawn. So there you have it. And he has several examples and some oddball openings, like a very early Grand Prix attack, you can see here. But what else would you expect from Larson? He goes on to have more text, more description, a few more examples, and quite a long chapter itself. And now we're on to Chapter 7, The Secret Workshop of a Grandmaster by Paul Karras. So, this is an interesting chapter. Again, it starts with a lot of words. My understanding of this chapter is basically him talking about, how you can do opening preparation. And he starts deep into what appears to be a main line in the Roy Lopez opening. So, and he appears to just go very deep into this particular line. I have no idea of the current validity of any of this theory, but given how old this book is, as others have pointed out, that the chances are the recommendations are not theoretically sound anymore, but I'll leave that to the reader to judge. So with that, we go to the end of the book, and of course there's the standard index of openings, and you can see that there are a fairly wide range of openings covered. Interesting to see one Benko Gambit, which probably wasn't completely popularized at the time this book was first published, and a Budapest Gambit, which I haven't been known to play before, so I'll be interested to check that out. But that's an idea of the openings. With that, of course, as others have mentioned, it was an invitation to subscribe to the RHM survey of current chess openings, and this was a loose leaf style of opening material, and it was intended to be a current update on the latest theory. And you can see over here the list of openings that were covered, which are fairly standard, and interestingly enough, the Benko Gambit is one, so maybe I misspoke about the Benko Gambit. So, that's the book. As I said, I collected it primarily for collector's purposes. I am a book collector, but I do hope to read it at some point, and I think I will learn something given my relatively low rating that I have. So I hope you enjoyed this. Again, apologize for the recording quality, but I'll set up my studio here at some point, and maybe future videos will be of higher quality. Thanks again.